Week, the Minister in the Presidency, Ntshavheni, addressed the nation on our security assessments, assuring us that our intelligence structures are robust and ready to tackle any domestic or foreign threats, including a coup d'etat. It's a phrase that certainly captures attention and raises questions. So what exactly is a coup d'etat, and what measures would the country need to have in place to effectively counter such an attempt? To help us understand this critical topic, we are now joined by retired SANDF General Maomela Motau, who will provide this expert insight for us. A very good morning to you, General. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. I was telling our audience that you're also credited for your contribution towards the establishment of NICOC in the way that we know and understand it, as well as the National Security Council. But just quickly, before we go into the definition of a coup d'etat, what do you make of the decision that has been taken to actually release the National Security Strategy, albeit a reducted version of it?
That was very interesting that the minister released the estimate. It's actually the annual estimate I think she was dealing with in order to give the country an understanding of what we are facing as a country. And I thought it was interesting, even though I thought it focused on issues which I never thought they would be concerning us.
Yeah, what sort of issues are those?
No, the issue of a coup d'etat, I thought it's a far-fetched issue. It is not something which really, it's a serious issue for South Africa. Why
do you make that argument?
Because clearly there is my assessment of the situation in our country. There is clearly no indicators of any possible coup. Possible coups, if we study them, they are pre-indicators. They don't just happen. It's not something which you can just think of. That's one aspect. And in the case of South Africa, you need to understand the architecture of the security system in South Africa to start talking about possible coups and so on. It doesn't give any indications that it is possible or easy to actually think of making such a coup d'etat. Yeah. A coup d'etat is a military thing, and you have to analyze your military architecture. You have to analyze the morale of the forces and the readiness to serve of the forces themselves.
Yeah, and I found that choice of words very interesting by the minister, and the reference to a coup d'etat, potential risk of a coup d'etat, but measures are in place, she says, to mitigate those. She says people are always planning, but over the past few days or weeks, there hasn't been any attempt, at least that they are aware of. But the gravity of it, and as you say, that a coup d'etat, by its very definition, is a military power or internal military power wanting to overthrow the state, and currently such an assessment doesn't exist.
Definitely, as far as I'm concerned, there is no such indications. Some of us are brought up in the field of intelligence. We are slaves of that upbringing. And we watch carefully about what is taking place inside the country. I would think the minister perhaps indicated a coup d'etat. It was an unfortunate choice of words, as you are saying, because the minister, I think, was referring to the Mukwana's, Lieutenant General Mukwana's situation. And because Mukwana's was wearing military fatigues, I think the police fatigues when he made that statement, and it might have created an impression that there is military behind him. I don't think that was the situation.
Yeah, and just for clarity, that is the Special Task Force uniform that he has had on. And of course, with the camouflage, it does resemble that of the military. to a certain extent. The Minister of Sport and Arts and Culture actually also spoke on this, Gayton McKenzie, and he spoke about those optics, that this is not something that happens in South Africa. We are not a country that would be seen to be prone to an overthrow of the state in such a fashion.
Yeah, as I says, the architecture, security architecture in South Africa, make it very difficult to spring a coup. But because as I watched General Mkwana's interview, I actually thought, what is this all about? Is it mimicking Traoré in Burkina Faso? You know, the situation of Burkina Faso and South Africa are totally different. And the size of the country, the size of the military, and the deployment inside the country, it will tell you a story that this was actually very well planned, and to make sure that such adventures like a military coup don't become real in our country.
Yeah, let's quickly then go back to the national security strategy. The potential risk that comes from cybercrime as well as our porous borders. From your perspective, is there a risk at all to the country, considering that you have the porous borders? I'm just trying to go through my notes here, and I'll read a section from that security, from the security strategy. But what's your take on what has been shared about that potential risk and also the porous borders?
Let me start by the porous borders. I think it is a serious problem. It's a serious challenge, which I think is not being taken very seriously as I look at things. You have in recent times found that the police were challenged by armed foreigners, Pakistanis in Fortsburg. You know that the military and the police were being pelted by stones by foreigners crossing the borders around Beitbridge. These are serious matters. And when they come inside the country, of late you have found our people battling for medical treatment because the hospitals are full of foreigners. You know, you have seen it in Soweto now, the ordinary people stopping foreigners coming in there. And that's one serious issue. And one of the aspects which is coming there is that foreigners are now collecting medicines in South Africa, sending medicines back home. Now, this is actually undermining the efficiency and efficacy of the state. When we talk about service delivery, we are talking about our people not getting access to medical services because clinics, hospitals don't have medicines. This is a serious challenge which we need to look at. Now, when you look at the international situation today, you'll realize that South Africa has always been a bridge to the continent. Now, having been a bridge to the continent, South Africa therefore must understand it will be on the forefront of fighting to defend Africa and to make sure that Africa has got space to determine its own policies and or whatever the continent is struggling with. So that is one problem South Africa faces. And we are going to have to understand that you are going to have situations of the Americans putting pressure on us, Western countries putting pressure on us. That we should always understand. And I think our security system must basically also focus on those two aspects as the major issues as far as I'm concerned. Those are serious issues. They have got to do with our economy. They have got to do with the security of the state itself.
Yeah, actually, I found the passage in the security strategy. It says that the other concerning challenge is the lack of monitoring and uncontrolled movement of refugees and asylum seekers, exacerbating threats to security. It can trigger situations that could lead to public violence and act of terror because of competition for resources.
Definitely, definitely. Acts of terror, you know, when you start allowing people to come into your country and start meddling into how the country is run. I've just looked at a situation now where people wanted to register a party which must fight for an Islamic state in our country. While they are aware what our constitution says about our religious attitudes to the states must have towards religion, I mean, but people are starting to bring in foreign concepts inside our country. And these are not South Africans, these are foreigners who are in our country today. You have foreigners today who would like to have certain areas of our country to be solely be either Nigerian, Ethiopian, or Pakistani. I mean, the latest is when you have, I think in Carltonville, where our people were saying they are being chased out by Pakistanis not to do business there. We are not, we are going to be labeled xenophobic when we do that, but when all other people in the world do that, I was looking at what is happening in Britain. What is happening in the United States? Donald Trump himself trying to stop Mexicans, but they are not being labeled xenophobic. Only South Africans will be stopped because it is in the interest of certain powers for South Africa to become unstable. It's in the interest.
Actually, the security strategy does speak about illegal migrants creating no-go areas for South Africans. But just quickly in conclusion, now speaking about the USA, yesterday there was a flight that landed in Eswatini, and of course Eswatini being part of SADC. Some people are saying that this could be a potential risk to the region, having so-called unwanted criminals being deported from the USA to an African state, in this case SADC. Do you believe that there is a potential risk at all? Would this possibly have been something that is discussed within SADC?
No, not necessarily in SADC, but obviously SADC must be interested. But I think Swaziland shouldn't have taken that decision without actually engaging South Africa. They are an independent state, but South Africa is the most critical neighbor Swaziland has. You know, it might call for South Africa. That action might call for South Africa to tighten its control of who comes in from Swaziland, which is not going to be very good for our two countries. So I want to believe that that was an unfortunate thing for Eswatini to do in these circumstances. It is clearly not going to be correct also for Lesotho to do that, because we are very close neighbors, or they are a part of our geographical arrangement. So for them to decide independently to bring in people who are not even Amaswat to come in and be hosted in Swaziland, it is really unfortunate. And I think South African government must actually take this thing seriously and engage the Swazi government so that we do not have such a repetition in future.
All right. Thank you so much, Rita. Maomela Motau, retired South African National Defence Force General. Thank you so much for making time for us.